morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Have you ever watched one of those spectacular wrecks involving horses, cattle, and maybe ropes, and when things fall apart, do you ever get the uncontrollable urge to laugh?
And it was just like a slingshot. It picked that young guy up and slung him straight forward. By now this horse was pointed right straight back at the bull, and this young guy comes shooting through the air.
Well, that's one of the stories that you'll hear today, and Baxter Black has a heartwarming look at a very special guy.
If a kid can't understand it, it's probably bound to fail. He'd rather have a good man's word than a contract in the mail.
On the Rangeland News, we'll look at a lot of things, including where the markets are headed.
Steer prices could come down next year by...
And find out how much just a little later. And in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight...
The herd busts and thunders towards the draw, ears alert and noses flared, and cowboys racing for the pass with hard, determined stares.
We have another good one, and we'll hear some great stories from the real people of the West after Gary Prescott starts things off.
With the whoop and the yell of an early morn, the cabby comes in on the run, the old bell mare a-clangin' in the lead. Trot 'em down to the horse corral, they mill around the pen a while, then settle down and eat their morning's feed. Standing by his daddy's side, wiping sleep out of his eyes, with hat pulled low and boots up to his knees. Papa steps into the pen, shakes him out a hula hand. He catches out old Coco with graceful ease. It's a big day in the life of this little buckaroo, and inside to the man he'll grow to be. Working pins, good horse flesh, branded fires, and a double hot catch will stand out in this cowboy's memory. Roundup time on the old T-Heart, we hit the brush with an early start, dodging limbs and catclaw all the way. Watch for stragglers, Papa said, push 'em on out up ahead. We're burning daylight, Papa would always say. Comb the brush on Boggy Creek, the cattle all look fat and sleek, newborn calves standing at their sides. Finish up the morning's round, push 'em on to the holding ground, break for lunch before the evening's ride. It's a big day in the life of this little buckaroo, and inside to the man he'll grow to be. Working pins, good horse flesh, branded fires, and a double hot catch will stand out in this cowboy's memory. Cattle bawling at the working pen, stirring dust in the blowing wind, cut the dries and hold 'em to the rear. Hocking calves with short catch rope, drag 'em up through the branding smoke, vaccinating and swallow pork the left ear. It's a big day in the life of this little buckaroo, and inside to the man he'll grow to be. Working pins, good horse flesh, branding fires, and a double hot catch will stand out in this cowboy's memory. Working pins, good horse flesh, branding fires and a double hot catch will stand out in this cowboy's memory.
Well, Ron Hoffman runs the very successful Ranch and Feedlot Rider program at Lakeland College in Vermilion. He's got a colorful story to share in a little while. But first, here's one from the great Ohio horseman Patrick King. And after Patrick, you'll hear one from rising star in the horse world, Kateri Cowley.
I've had both of my legs broken by horses before, not at the same time, thank goodness. Slips and falls, bad footing, things like that. I've been on quite a few that things have gotten a bit western, and I think we've all found the leak at the top of our saddle. But when I think about all the hairy, scary kind of situations I've been in with horses, all of them sort of come out as a learning experience. I wish I could say I had a really good hairy wreck story to tell, but I guess I don't.
That way, and it's a good thing you have it, that's for sure. Well, I can think of some of mine, and most of them come back to this epidemic of stupidity that seems to be going around and catching. I remember when I'd bring one colt home, I'd tie him to an inner tube, looped around a fence post in my round pen, and I'd go take another one out, and maybe 2 hours later I'd come back and untie and unsaddle the one who was standing there. The last one of the day, I thought, well, I'll just leave him tied up while I go do chores and have supper and everything. And I got in, and the phone started ringing, and I got busy. And when I went out there at 8 o'clock the next morning, that poor colt was still standing there saddled. I knew there was something I was supposed to do. So, stuff like that. How about a Kateri? Yeah, Katari. Not Katari. Kateri. Yeah, got to have that right. You've had some adventures, I'll bet you, in the mountains and country.
There's been so many different adventures. And one time I was actually bareback on the horse that I won Calgary Stampede on. When he was just a young guy, about 5 years old, and I went out and met up with a grizzly bear, and people wouldn't actually believe that I saw a grizzly bear because I was all by myself, and I had nothing, no cell phone, no evidence that there was a grizzly out there, and he had stood up in front of me and made some weird noises. And when I got back to the ranch, I was so thrilled and just amazed that this actually happened. And nobody believed me. They're like, "Oh, grizzlies don't come this low in the valley." And I was like, "Yeah, no, nobody, not one person gave me any credit for this."
Oh my goodness.
But then the next morning, when my parents were doing a tour of the ranch, that grizzly bear actually followed me back to Rafter 6 and was standing right by our church. So then everybody believed that it was a real story.
I guess. Yeah. My goodness.
So it was quite an experience.
Wow. We got black bears all over the country, but grizzlies, never seen one.
Yeah, not so common.
There's more great stories and great music when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Well, T.J. Claiborne started working with horses and cattle on the big stations of Australia, and for many years now, he's worked and trained in North America. And he told me this interesting horse training episode.
2013, I did the Extreme Mustang Million in Texas. And I took 4 Mustangs, 2 2-year-olds and 2 4-year-olds. And there was a little horse I called Miss Kitty. And I had her 2 months and she hadn't eloped. Same thing. So a friend of mine said, "Come over to the big arena and we'll get her to elope." And he said, "Bring a pair of spurs and a little stick with you." And this is a story I don't use a whip anymore because I was going around there and he said, "Jab with the spurs," and I give her a little jab and she didn't do anything. He said, "Hit her with the stick." So I give her a spank with the stick, and last thing I remember was hitting the dust. And when I got up off the ground, my shirt was stuck to my shoulder blades. And when I got home, I said to a friend of mine, I said, "Would you mind having a look at my back?" And I peeled my shirt off, and there was a mark about 6 inches long and about 8 inches wide between my shoulder blades where she tore the skin off in the bottom of his new arena. I landed on the gravel part, not the sand part. But that filly went on and won 4th in the working cow horse for me, so at the Mustang.
So she learned to lope.
She learned to lope, but boy, it took her about 9 weeks to learn to lope.
Is that right?
That's the slowest horse I've ever had.
Oh, gosh. That's TJ. Now, Ron Hoffman has a pretty good adventure that consists of a young cowboy, a green horse, a rope, and a bull. After one more branding song, this is Brand Hill.
springtime is long on the mountain. Snow flies for 9 long months a year. When the warm south wind blows, every cowboy knows spring around up time is finally here. So call the boys at the Big A-double-L. Call Mike and Jeff and Jason and the crew. Come the break of dawn, we'll be saddled up and gone. 600 head for the day is through. 'Cause there's nothing like the Wasatch in the springtime. Nothing like the freedom in the air. And there ain't nothing better than dragging calves to the fire. And there's nothing like the smell of burning hair. Pass by like the wind, and the boys have loaded up and they're heading home. But come this time next year, you can bet they'll be right here until the cattle and the West are dead and gone. 'Cause there's nothing like the Wasatch in the springtime. Nothing like the freedom in the air. Nothing better than dragging calves to the fire. And there's nothing like the smell of burning hair. No, there's nothing like the smell of burning hair. Nothing like the Wasatch in the springtime.
And as I mentioned, Ron Hoffman runs the very successful Ranch and Feedlot Rider program at Lakeland College in Vermilion, where they train young men and women. They take a green colt to school, and by the time the course is over, the person and the horse are ready to work in Alberta's cattle industry or North America's cattle industry. And anyway, Ron told me this story a while ago, and it was really something.
Yeah, I had a young guy working with me. He wasn't working for me. He was working for the guy that I was doing some custom pasture work for. I rode his pastures for him and contracted. But he had a young hired man that had some experience on a horse and wanted to come do some of the things. And so I said, well, sure, he can come with me. And we had a pretty good-sized Charolais bull, probably a 2,500-pound bull that had foot rot. And so we needed to give him a shot. And I went and headed this bull, and this young guy come up on his own horse that he had and roped this bull by 2 heels, which was pretty good, but this horse wouldn't hold anything to save your life. As soon as the rope tightened up, he'd give it up, and he wouldn't hold anything. He'd just go forward, and he wouldn't listen. And you know, we were trying to kind of get this bull stretched out a little, and with 2 heels in, I thought if we get those heels pulled out, he'll fall down, you know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this horse wouldn't hold anything. I said to him, well, I said, you get him pointed the other way, and I said, you know, when you get them lined out, you go hit those heels a little and jerk them out behind them, and then don't give it up if you can help it. So he did. He got this horse pointed the other way, and he kicked him in the guts. This old pain horse, he took off, but he didn't have any more heart pulling than he did holding front ways. And when he went to give it up, he turned around to the left and got this young guy kind of tangled up in this rope, and the nylon was stretched pretty hard from this horse hitting it, and it was just like a slingshot. It picked that young guy up and slung him straight forward. By now this horse was pointed right straight back at the bull, and this young guy come shooting through the air, and he was just like a flying squirrel. His arms were spread out and his legs were spread out, and his belt buckle hit right about the tail head of this bull that he had been pulling on. And you know, as soon as he hit, I pulled the bull forward and got him out of there so that he wasn't down underneath. But but his eyes were seriously very big while he was flying through the air, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it except try and land.
Did you get the bull doctor?
Oh, yeah. No, we got him back on his horse, and of course, when he had to turn everything loose, and the bull stepped out of both heels, and he got him roped by one, and then we just threw a front leg trap and stepped him over and laid him down and got better. We were trying to, when he had two heels, I thought, well, we should be able to kind of get him laid over, but it didn't work out that way.
Well, there's more adventures like that coming up, and some interesting developments for you on the Rangeland News, and Baxter Black is next, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, with a little peek at Johnny Was a Mule Man.
What makes America the most productive, generous country on earth? Well, it's ordinary people like us working together to achieve extraordinary things. B&W builds the trailer hitches that hook the loads that haul the grain, the coal, the cattle, cotton, gas, horses, and RVs that keep America on the road. Quality made, employee-owned, and customer-tuned. B&W trailer hitches, working together to keep America proud.
I worked for a man 10 years on a big livestock outfit. He was a tough man to work for. He'd throw a feller into the deep end and expect him to swim to shore. And more than once he'd tell me to do something. Well, I'd ask, how do you want me to do it? You just do her the best way you know how, he'd say. And if it came out okay, he wouldn't say much. But if it didn't, there was hell to pay. But I learned a lot from him, to have confidence in my own abilities, to try new things, to believe in myself, and not be afraid. And he liked mules. Maybe that's because they were hard-headed, too. Johnny was a mule man, which says a lot to me. His motto, keep it simple. Lay it out for me to see. If a kid can't understand it, it's probably bound to fail. He'd rather have a good man's word than a contract in the mail. He never trusted horses or computers on the shelf. He'd rather count the cattle, check the pasture for himself. And if he knew you knew your business, he'd back you to the hilt and gladly give you credit for the fences that you built. But he'd ride you like a blanket so you couldn't go astray. 'Cause to him, it all was personal. He knew no other way. He didn't have the answers to each problem you were heir, but he figured you could solve them. That's why he put you there. If you could tie a diamond hitch or pour the old concrete, that meant as much to him as running out a balance sheet. See, he knew that all the business in the end came down somehow to a single salaried cowboy who went out and checked a cow. I guess he always thought himself not one of the elite, but a man who worked for wages and just got a better seat. And I'm sure he spent some sleepless nights doubting what he'd done, but he trusted his opinion more than almost anyone's. So if he prayed, which most men do when sleep is closing in, he probably prayed that Scottish prayer that suited men like him. Lord, grant that I am right, that my judgment's not gone blind, for thou knowest, in thy wisdom, it's hard to change my mind.
This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by B&W Turnover Bowl.
July 1st to the 3rd, it's an awesome weekend of cowboy poetry and country music. You'll be entertained by Twin Kennedy, Stuart McDougall, the Command Sisters, B.J. Smith, Ed Brown, Wendy Scott, Randy and Ray Smith, Mag Mawiney, Matt Robertson, and Russ Graff. The show is completely indoors, no matter what the weather. Meals and a concession available. For information on weekend and day passes, contact the Vilna Agricultural Society at 780-260-0222 and visit vilnaagsociety.com. Now, just ahead of the Rangeland News, here's that ranch-raised gal from Saskatchewan, Eli Barzee.
cattle. I got done with my business and I headed out the door. He decided he should follow, that I needed to hear more. He said, I didn't catch your name. I said, I didn't say. That windy dude kept talking as I quickly drove away. Big hat, no cattle, no horse, no saddle. You talk the talk, but you don't walk it. There's no jingle in your pocket. You're no cowboy, so skedaddle. Big hat, no cattle. Big hat, no cattle, no horse, no saddle. You talk the talk, but you don't walk it. There's no jingle in your pocket. You're no cowboy, so skedaddle. Big hat, no cattle. Big hat, no cattle. Big hat, no cattle.
Now the news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
Now, the Rangeland News, top of page 1. I guess the call is the simple effect of supply and demand. Meat production continues to go up, and how's that going to affect cattle prices, particularly steer prices, for the rest of this year and next year? Well, let's check in with our man in the USDA, Gary Crawford.
Agriculture Department forecasters are projecting another record U.S. meat production year for 2017, but production's also on the increase this year. And USDA livestock analyst Shale Shagam told us,
we've got larger supplies of most meats out there. We've got wholesale prices, which are down from a year ago, in some cases fairly sharply.
And for 2017, USDA is forecasting beef output up another 4%, pork about 2.5%, broilers about the same percentage increase. And Shagam says,
we would expect to see, as we move towards record production in 2017, that we're going to see pressure on cattle prices, pressure on hog prices, lower broiler prices.
Steer prices could come down next year by $3.20 a hundredweight, hogs by about $3.66, broilers by about a half cent a pound. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
As concerns grow about the continued effectiveness of antibiotics in human health, questions arise about the contribution of modern beef production to antimicrobial resistance in human medicine. The beef industry has felt some pressure to reconsider its methods of combating harmful bacteria in cattle. Well, here's the good news. A strategy for bacterial resistance to antibiotics in the beef industry has been developed in Canada to help make the best use of increased available funding. The new National Beef Antimicrobial Research Strategy was developed by the Beef Cattle Research Council and the National Beef Value Chain Roundtable. BCRC said research will play a critical role in the industry's ability to reduce medically important antimicrobial use and to develop, identify, and implement effective, responsible alternatives to antimicrobials. Years ago, I was involved in some discussions with other cattle producers to find a way to get more data from steers and heifers we shipped in the fall after they left the ranch. Like what was their ADG in the feedlot, how was their health, what was their finished weight, and how did they grade? we didn't really know what happened to these calves after they left, and the information could make a big difference in the genetics we looked at for cows and bulls. Well, after all those years, maybe we're getting somewhere. A recent Canadian project to share information from beef carcass data revealed that cattle from an elite breeding program were worth $219 a head more than the average. The elite calves are bred by Calgary Beef Booster. McDonald's Canada partly funded the information sharing initiative as part of its Sustainable Beef Pilot program, and other partners were Beef Booster, researchers from the University of Alberta's Livestock Genetics Centre, and Bixus, the internet-based National Beef Supply Database. The aim of the project was to evaluate whether sharing this data could have had some value to cow-calf producers and the beef industry. Researchers analyzed almost 2 million records from packing plants entered into Bixus from 2012 to 2014 as part of a previous project sponsored by the federal government. Then they cross-referenced the records with a proprietary set of data linking individual radio frequency ID tags from beef booster cattle to their sires and their dams. Very interesting what information that could be. Placements of cattle into Canadian feedlots were above a year ago during March, up 4%, or just over 6,000 head compared to a year ago. March was the 5th consecutive month of placements above a year earlier. As of April 1st, the reported Canadian number of animals in commercial feedlots was up 7%, or over 62,000 head above 2015. Now here's some interesting questions that a lot of us think about. What is the impact of public opinion on farmers and ranchers? How would you explain a GMO to a non-farmer? What does the next generation of agriculture bring to the table? How can we improve the media's perception of agriculture? Old MacDonald had a farm, but what about Mrs. MacDonald? Well, those are all the subjects selected for a public speaking competition for folks from 11 to 24 years of age at the Alberta Young Speakers for Agriculture's inaugural public speaking competition at the Calgary Stampede on July the 13th. The competition offers young folks the opportunity to compete with a 5 to 7 minute speech on the topics we just mentioned. Winners will have the opportunity to win a cash prize of up to $1,000. The deadline for applications is June 30th. For information, just go to albertayoungspeakers.com or email albertayoungspeakers@gmail.com. June the 21st is the day you might find those treasures you've been looking for. Great lineup of machinery and equipment at the Innisfail Auction Market. They started receiving machinery June 1st, and you can call them for more details. They have regular cattle sales every Wednesday, 2 horse sales a month, and get all the details at innisfailauctionmarket.com. And you know, there's always an issue of Alberta Beef Magazine and Beef Illustrated on our kitchen table. Great way to keep up with the cattle industry no matter where you live. And you can subscribe online at 403-250-1090. That takes us down to the final item. And my neighbor, who will remain nameless, but a lot of you know him, has a pretty good border collie. But once in a while, this good dog goes wandering. And a while back, he disappeared for a couple of weeks. And the poor guy was so distraught, didn't know what to do, so I suggested that he post a Facebook message. And he said, okay, I'll do it. Next day I said, did you post your message? And he said, yeah. I said, what did the message say? He said, it says, here, Jock. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up on the horse training file, a lot of people try to train their horse using human tendencies, and there's a problem. They're not human, and we're not horses. That's next when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. I'll swap a roping story with Ron Hoffman, and he'll tell us more about the course he heads up at Lakeland College in Vermilion, where students go to school with an unbroke young horse, and by the time they graduate, both the student and the horse have acquired all the necessary skills to work successfully in the livestock industry, in a feedlot, a working ranch, or wherever. And coming up on the horse training file, I'll discuss how assuming a horse thinks like a person does not work well. First, though, for those of you who've been asking about the next Spirit of the West cruise, I'm happy to tell you that it will take place in June of 2017, and the whole gang will be going
way up north to Alaska, way up north to Alaska, north to Alaska, we're going north for Russia's song. North to Alaska, we're going north for Russia's song.
That's right. My wife Billy and I will be hosting a great group of Spirit of the Westers aboard the beautiful Holland America ship, the Noordam, and we'll sail out of the spectacular Vancouver Harbor, visiting Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, Glacier Bay, and then we'll have 2 spectacular days of sightseeing in Denali National Park. Then we'll board the magnificent McKinley Railroad with their sightseeing domed cars and hopefully have a good look at North America's highest peak, Mount McKinley. And then it's on to Anchorage. We'll have our Western music concerts, sing-alongs, great food, and it's a trip that's been on the bucket list of a lot of folks for a long time. And the whole package includes return airfare from Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver, and includes ground transfers in Vancouver and Anchorage, plus all of our Spirit of the West group gatherings, all port and government taxes, all onboard meals, entertainment, and room service, and a special group reception, lots of networking opportunities, our special Spirit of the West gifts, the highly coveted Spirit of the West t-shirt, and a special Spirit of the West tour just for our group in Juneau. Now here's something else. If you like traveling by rail, we have an optional Rocky Mountaineer rail package to travel from Calgary to Vancouver, available on request. Our entire schedule with prices and everything else is available on the cruise page at our website, hugh-mclennan.com. And you can get all the information at this toll-free number, 1-800-530-0131. Now the horse training file. I just try to do as little as possible it takes to get as much result as I can. Now, those wise words apply to a high-level horsemanship of every kind, and it also applies to the art and science of working cattle, especially from horseback. And that quote, by the way, comes from John Ensign, fine horseman working out of Belgrade, Montana. Another one of John's quotes I really like. A lot of people try to train their horse using human tendencies. Obviously, a horse is a horse and a human is a human. We don't think the same. Now, something else I've observed for a long time, and it's not true in 100% of the situations, but most great horsemen I've watched work barehanded. They don't wear gloves. My thought is that if your hands are light enough and you are sensitive enough to the feel of your horse, the feel that your horse is sending back to you, you don't need gloves, unless, of course, it's darn cold outside. Now, many of the problems in the horse-human relationship come from us humans not being aware of the subtlest, tiniest changes taking place on our horse. Asking for a soft vertical flex, a slight shift of the horse's weight from the front quarters to the hind, or a very controlled movement of one foot can all be done with not much more than a thought and a visualization from a rider. I have a couple of handy props in my arena that help me be aware of this. One is a wooden bridge made of 2x10s nailed together with the center of the bridge resting on a big fence post. The idea is to ride my horse onto the bridge and stop right on the balance point and be able to tip it frontwards or backwards with a slight shift of his weight. And if my horse has a problem doing this, it tells me one thing. I'm using too much pressure and not recognizing that moment when he tries. If you have one of those, or you can borrow one, it's kind of fun to do that, and it'll tell you a lot about where your horse is at. Something else our horses really enjoy is that daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. You can find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. And that's the horse training file. The Stoney Plain Cowboy Gathering is August 19th to 21st at Heritage Park, Stoney Plain, with a great lineup of entertainers, including Eli Barzee, Jackson McKenzie, Ed Peekycoot, Doris Daly, Ryan Fritz.
It's raining in the saddle, the wind's in your face.
Celebrating cowboy traditions through music and poetry for 24 years. For reservations and information, call 780-963-6092 and see StoneyPlainCowboyPoetry.com. If you like horses, you'll love what's happening Saturday, June 11th. It's the John Scott Motion Picture Animal Reduction Horse Sale with 35 to 40 head of broke horses from John Scott Productions and guest consigners. Ranch, trail, roping, penning teams, and much more. And it all takes place at Irvine's Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store. Exit 305, Crossfield, Alberta. For more information, call Jordan 403-783-0246. Now, just ahead of a couple of roping stories, here's a guy that has a great way around a cowboy song. His name is Ed Wall.
I'm just an old cowpoke, and I was born to ride. I was born to skid and scaddle all across the countryside. I'm just an old cowpoke, just common folk. But I like to have fun on my own Saturday night. And there ain't nothing bad you could say about this old cowboy, because an old cowboy like me still has something up his sleeve. I'm just an old cowpoke, I always roll my own smoke. I like to cinch my own saddle, I diddle and daddle, and I can still handle a rope. I used to rodeo, I could steal a whole damn show. Yeah, I could rope 'em and ride 'em, dog 'em and tie 'em. Now my old lady won't let me go. But there ain't nothing bad you could say about this old cowboy, because an old cowboy like me still has something that you need. I'm just an old cowpoke, I was born to ride. I was born to sit a saddle all across the countryside. I used to rodeo, I could steal a whole damn show. Yeah, I could rope 'em and ride 'em, dog 'em and tie 'em. Now my old lady won't let me go. And there ain't nothing bad you could say about this old cowboy, because an old cowboy like me still has something up his sleeve. I'm just an old cowpoke, an old cowpoke.
Now that's one of those good songs that works real well to sing to your horse when you're jogging along. I'm sure he'd enjoy it, or she. Now, whenever folks who have earned their spurs, working cattle in the open, spending long days horseback, get together, inevitably there are some great stories just under the surface. I was having coffee with Ron Hoffman the other day, and we got to talking about roping, doctoring cattle on horses that really hadn't had much experience doing that.
I remember a neighbor was helping me doctor a bunch. We had a bunch of cows with foot rot one wet spring, and neither one of us had it. We were riding a horse that had roped off at all. And so the plan worked pretty well. I'd ride up close enough and I could catch one by the head, jump off, and dally to a poplar tree somewhere. You know, we got 4 or 5 cows treated that way, and then we had this young bull to do, and he was pretty bad, and getting the rope on him wasn't hard at all. And I jumped off again, and I got about 5 wraps around this big aspen tree, and I'm holding the one end, and Gordon got off, and he gave him a big shot. That's when you could give him a shot in the hip back then. Yeah. Now I got to turn him loose. And so I had about maybe 3 feet of rope with a big knot on the end of the rope with the end of it, and so I just let go. The bull pulls back, that rope swings around, and it hit me in the belly 5 times before he pulled it loose. But they go on forever. Anyway, this the program you have at Lakeland College just a great thing for young people in Alberta, preparing them for the agricultural industry, and that's going well?
Yeah, you bet. Probably our focus has changed a little. We're probably doing a little more performance horse training. Seems to be a shift in the students that are coming wanting more performance background and the training they're doing. So we do some basics of some reining, we do some basics of some cow horse and cutting, but they still go learn the rope, and we'll bring the college cows in when they need to be brought in, and we'll do some sorting outside, and we'll do those kinds of things. So tried to sort of, I guess, add a little more professional horsemanship into it.
Mm-hmm. And anybody that would really be interested in looking closer at this program, your website or phone contact?
You can go to the Lakeland College website, which is www.lakelandcollege.ca, and you can scroll through there on the academics and get down to our program. My phone number and email is up there, and we'd sure be happy to talk to people. Yeah.
Next, it's our look at a classic song of the West and the story behind it. And then the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. In this week's Classic Song of the West segment, we'll look back at what was a song and a poem written by Vivian Clark Gilbert and his wife Mary Margaret Hadler. It has been widely recorded and was one of the top songs in the U.S. in 1955 and again in 1962. Members of the Western Writers of America chose it as one of the top 100 Western songs of all time. It was recorded in 1955 by Rusty Draper and several others, and it actually became one of the top songs of that year. Basically, it's the story of an old prospector and his mule, and some historians suggest it refers to the story of the Lost Dutchman mine in the Superstition Mountains of Arizona. The mine is named after a German immigrant, Jacob Waltz, who purportedly discovered it in the 19th century and kept its location a secret. The Lost Dutchman's is possibly the most famous lost mine in North American history. People have been seeking the Lost Dutchman's mine since at least 1892, while according to one estimate, 8,000 people annually made some effort to locate the Lost Dutchman's mine. Now, I don't know if anyone has previously connected the legend of the Lost Dutchman's mine with this song, but to me, it seems like a possibility. The song became a top hit again in 1962, recorded by Billy Vaughn and his orchestra, with the voices of the Raycon of Singers and a narration by Ken Nordine. Over the years, it's been recorded by many artists, including Johnny Cash and Lorne Greene and Jim Reeves. And this is a real nice version from Bob Wagner, who sings all the parts, plays all the instruments, on this week's classic Song of the West, The Shifting Whispering Sands.
Listen to the age-old story of the shifting whispering sands. Yes, it always whispers to me of the days of long ago, when the settlers and the miners fought the crafty Navajo, how the cattle roamed the valley, happy people worked the land, and now everything is covered by the shifting whispering sand. How the miner left his buckboard, went to work his claim that day, and the burros broke their halters when they thought he'd gone to stay. How they found the aged miner lying dead upon the sand. After months they could but wonder if he died by human hand. So they dug his grave and laid him on his back and crossed his hand. And his secret still is hidden by the shifting whispering sands.
This is what they whispered to me on that quiet desert air, of the people and the cattle and the miner lying there. If you want to learn their secrets, wander through this quiet land, and I'm sure you'll hear the story of the shifting, whispering sand. Shifting, whispering sand.
The Bliss Cattle Company has run cattle operations in several western states for more than 35 years now under the guidance of Paul Bliss. Paul is a cattleman, rancher, and a fine horseman, and he was the Will Rogers Award winner as the top male cowboy poet of 2014 from the Academy of Western Artists. I've always enjoyed Paul's poems, especially this one that he calls Cowboy Poetry in Motion.
The morning starts at 4 a.m. The cookie rings the bell. "Come on, get up, you cowboys!" comes a loud, persistent yell. "Come on, shake out, the coffee's hot. Don't lay there in your soggans. Roll 'em tight and get 'em up. All bedrolls to the wagon." Well, you can smell the food a-cooking. Feel that chill that's in the air as you gather round the chuck box with an emotionless stare. You grab biscuits drowned in gravy, and you thank the God above for giving you the peace of mind to do the things you love. The cook calls out for seconds, "Better get it while it's hot!" While the hoodie loads the bedrolls up, pulls the tarp down, ties the knot. The jingler brings your horses in while the nighthawk grabs some chuck, and you ponder about the last few weeks, how you all got by on luck. The mountains that you trailed across, the rivers, streams, and swells, the thunderstorms, the dust and sweat. Some days it felt like hell. And your muscles sore and tender from a colt that bucked you down, and knowing today is the last day, and you'll arrive in town. 290 miles. Oh, wrangling horses all the way. There's an emotion that can't be described when you call positions for the day. And 2 empty saddles traveled with us as they rode there side by side. In memory, those 2 cowboys and how they lived and died. The team is almost harnessed up, the leaders start to paw. "Make a circle, boys, and start 'em slow. Head 'em up that draw." In the east, the stars, they disappear. A blue-gray takes its place, and the pink cliffs now are standing out where before there was no trace. The herd busts and thunders towards the draw, ears alert and noses flared, and cowboys racing for the pass with hard, determined stares. Well, they glide through rock and timber with a ballerina's grace, over logs and brush and ledges, like a royal steeplechase. The dust, it starts fogging up, you smell leather, horse and sweat, and cowboys crashing through the brush, but still there's no regrets. Manes and tails flying, spurs are ringing out of tune. It's an illusion watching horse and man race towards a fading moon. Down through the pines and cedars where the scrub oak slaps your chaps, well, you memorize this picture, boys, for time has seemed to lapse. With cowboys in position, the herd now in control, you watch the horses all line out as single file they go. The sun, it tops a ragged ridge and the rays come busting through, and you watch the herd snake down the trail in solemn overview. Well, it's a picture and can't be described by just anybody's notion, 'cause partner, it's a feeling, cowboy poetry in motion.
The prairies out onto the ranges wide, I marvel at God's wonders beneath the pale blue skies. Cattle graze on grasses that are washed by summer rains. I thank God He made this cowgirl caretaker of His range. I see God in the faces of the newborn baby calves in the streams of bubbling waters that rush on by and laugh. And the deer that graze the meadows of this rough and rugged land. I thank God he made this cowgirl a partner in his plan. Made this cowgirl a partner in his plan. I'm standing in my stirrups above my horse's ears. I see the land before me, the land I've known for years. The bridle reins between my fingers rest easy in my hand, and I thank God he made this cowgirl caretaker of his land. I see God in the faces of the newborn baby calves, in the streams of bubbling waters that rush on by and laugh. And the deer that graze the meadows of this rough and rugged land. And I thank God he made this cowgirl a partner in his plan.
The pleasing voice of Kimmy Hudson, and a pretty fitting song to wrap things up with today. Thank you so much for making the ride, and we have another good one lined up next week. Hope you can join us then. And I think I'll be able to coax my friend, world-class horseman Jonathan Field, into sitting in with me for a spell. Thanks again to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan at Meadow Springs Guest Ranch. You can find out all about them at meadowsprings.com. Be sure to look for the latest issue of Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine at your favorite newsstand, or you can subscribe online at canadiancowboy.com or call 1-800-943-7336. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.